1st and 2nd Samuel. 1st and 2nd Samuel. What are they about? First Samuel is about the prophet Samuel. It introduces us to Eli, and then we come right on the scene instantly to Samuel, and we're taken through the time period when Samuel was a prophet and judge in Israel. 2nd Samuel introduces us to King David. So we have the transition in 1 Samuel from the theocracy to the monarchy, and then we're introduced to King David. And sandwiched in the middle of that is Ruth. There's an underlying theme I just want to emphasize this evening. I just want to look at, and I'm hoping it won't take us very long. And so I want to read some verses here in chapter 2 of Judges. We read verses 1 and 2, and I'd like to read starting in verse 2. And if you'll bear with me this evening, because we have so much time, let's read quite a bit. And ye shall make no inhabitants, or no league with the inhabitants of this land. This is what God said. I'll never break my covenant with you. And ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? I thought only parents asked that question. Tell me. You ever have parents tell you, why did you do that? Tell me. My mom used to have a good cadence, and saying, why did you do that? Tell me, why did you do that? Did anybody else we all did, right? Everybody had a, tell me why you did that, parent. Does anybody know a good answer? Anybody know a bad answer? I finally figured out I'm wicked. I'm unrighteous. Yeah, it used to be I don't know, but now I know. It's because I am wicked to the core. I'm a degenerate. That's why. And that is the answer, except that you don't really think that's what your mom wants you to say when she's asking that. Or fathers ask this, right? Not just mothers. But God asked the children of Israel, tell me why you did this. I told you that I will always keep my covenant with you. I will never break my covenant with you. You are to drive out the inhabitants of the land, because if they remain in the land, then they're idols. And the idolatrous, fornicating relationships that go with the idols are going to turn your heart away. Let's read on. Would you go down with me to verse 11? And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Balaam. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other small g gods of the gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves to the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtaroth. Verse 14 is predictable. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. Is God right to be angry here? Yes. We could ask God the question he asked Jonah here. Doest thou well to be angry? And Jonah said yes, and he was wrong. God could say yes, and he's right, because he made a covenant with Israel. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Israel said, we'll walk in it. Which delivered them out of the hand of those that spoiled them, and yet they would not hearken unto their judges. And they went a-whoring after other gods, and bowed themselves unto them. They turned quickly out of the way, which their fathers walked in, obeying the commandments of the Lord, but they did not so. And when the Lord raised them up judges, then the Lord was with the judge, and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For it repented the Lord because of their groanings, by reason of them that oppressed them. And it came to pass, when the judge was dead, that they returned, and corrupted themselves more than their fathers, in following other gods to serve them, and to bow down unto them. They ceased not from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way. Well, that is the theme of Judges, isn't it? It's the sin cycle. You have God's blessing, and then you have God's people going into idolatry and sin, and then you have judgment, and then you have deliverance, and then you have the sin cycle start again. You have deliverance, you have blessing, and then you have idolatry, and then you have judgment, and then you have deliverance, and then you have blessing, and then you have idolatry, and then you have judgment, and then you have deliverance, and then you have blessing. It's the cycle. You know, it's helpful for us to know because God didn't ever turn His back on His people. He never said, I will never save you, I will never forgive you. And it's important for us to know the sin cycle can be broken. It was broken for lifetimes. Joshua never was part of the sin cycle. There are judges that weren't part of the sin cycle, and the people in those days weren't part of the sin cycle. So we don't use this as an excuse to say, well, this is the way it goes. You know, if we say we have not sinned, we make him a liar. You know, so we're going to sin, so, you know, it's the way. And sometimes we just condition ourselves to just go ahead and jump down the slide. You know what I'm talking about? It's like, well, you know, it's going to happen. Might as well just go. And then go right into sin. My friend, you can have victory. God gave you victory. You are risen with Jesus Christ. You have that status. You have that standing. You do not have to repeat the sin cycle. It, however, is helpful for us to understand what's going on around us. You don't have to have a sin cycle internally. It's good for us to know that righteousness exalteth the nation, but sin is a reproach of any people. And you can see the cycle, can't you? We've seen miniature cycles, all of us in our lifetime, and we're not a theocracy, but we've seen it in America. We've seen it worldwide, the sin cycle. We have seen it in churches. We've seen it in individuals' lives. And again, how does it go? It starts with God's blessing, and then idolatry, and then judgment, and then deliverance, and then God's blessing, and it goes round and round and round as a cycle. But it doesn't have to be. Now here's the deal, folks. Let's don't have it in our lives. I can't do anything about the generation which came before me. Do you know my generation, I'm a end of the Gen Xers. And my generation wasted the first 10 years in full-time ministry, I feel like, bickering and putting down the guys that came before us. Just attacking the fundamentalists. Just going after them, maligning them, finding fault, and just spend all their time talking about what that generation was wrong about. Waste a lot of time worrying about what people did before they came onto the scene without having the gratitude they should have had of realizing, hey, we have heritage. Somebody gave us a starting place. And you ought to be able to just be thankful for where you're at and move forward. It's a great thing to be honest, isn't it? You say, hey, that's not right. These characteristics aren't things that God's pleased by. They're not going to be in my life and my ministry. But live in the present. And there are guys that live in the future. And they're all worried about what God's going to do, but they're not worried about what God is doing. My friend, don't give up 2021. There are so many people in a holding pattern right now. So many ministries in a holding pattern right now. You know what you need to be doing right now? You need to be living for Jesus right now. You can't do anything about the future right now. Don't waste your present. That's all that you're always going to have. That's when you're always going to be able to respond. You're out of fellowship with God? Get right. Right now. Oh, and this happens. Or, you know, when the consequences come, then no. Get right now. Live now. And that's the way we study Judges. We look at them, we see periods of time when the judges God raised up, delivered Israel, God's blessing came along with him, and they judged Israel, and they lived right. But then there's that cycle, that repeated pattern. Verse 20. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. And he said, because that this people have transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and have not hearkened unto my voice, I also will not henceforth drive out from before them of the nations which Joshua left when he died, that through them I may prove Israel, whether they will keep the way of the Lord to walk therein, as their fathers did keep it, or not. Therefore the Lord left those nations without driving them out hastily, neither delivered he them into the hand of Joshua. And I want you to pay attention, and we'll find our theme here tonight. I'm going to start the message really soon. Now these are the nations which the Lord left. Well, Dustin laughs. Brother, you are just such a nice guy. I mean, I'm going to buy you something sometime, maybe, if I get some money. Now these are the nations which the Lord left to prove Israel by them, even as many of Israel as had not known all the wars of Canaan, only that the generations of the children of Israel might know, to teach them war, and at the least such as before knew nothing thereof, namely, and I would. Don't we? I don't know how many people that if they were millionaires they'd give. I mean, if I just had so much money that I just, I got to where I didn't know what to do with it, I'd give it to God. Boy, aren't you a generous one? If I weren't going through this, I'd serve God. Then. And God said, I want you to have adversity so you'll know how to fight. You know how you're going through a hard time? So you know how to get through it. So you know how to get through hard times. If thou faint in the day of adversity, thy strength is small. You know why God gives you these things, these matters? To teach you. You ought to know how to fight. You ought to know what to do. Thank God for experienced believers who come to the place that when they hit a bump in the road, they don't even really know it's a bump. It's just like, well, yeah, that happens. And they just move forward, obeying God, living for Jesus. And it's good for us to have some things in our lives that prepare us for the real things that we're going to go through. And that's what God was doing with the Canaanites and these different individuals described. Still almost to our theme. We will get there, I hope. Verse 5, the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, among the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And they took their daughters to be their wives and gave their daughters to their sons and served their gods. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and forgat the Lord their God and served Balaam in the groves. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them in the hand of Chushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the children of Israel served Chushan-Rishathaim 8 years. And they had to say his name every day the whole time. And when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised up a deliverer, and we start to go through it. Now, if we were to read through Judges, we would find, though, one of the groups of individuals that vexed the Israelites, aside from the Philistines, were the Moabites. And the Ammonites. It's interesting that if you just do a word search of commonly recurring words and their derivatives, that's not a good way to study. You don't just, what's the word that comes up the most, and then you preach a message about the word, right? You guys ever heard the Strong's Concordance sermons? I'm not trying to do that to you here this evening. I'm going to do it to you a little bit just to punish all the people that I've had to listen to topical sermons from. But one of the words that comes up over and over and over again, particularly in this portion of the Scripture, but through the whole Bible, is the word Moab. Moab. And as I'm just studying, I'm looking for themes and I'm looking for interesting connections, especially when, of course, I get to Ruth. I realize the significance of Moab and the way that God used Moab. Let's just go back to Genesis 19, shall we? Let's run back to Genesis 19. really briefly. You know this story. It's tragic, this story in Genesis 19. This is Lot. You know, there's a list of people. I have a little black book when I read my Bible, and I put these people in the book thinking, God should have just killed that person, and, history would be different. Lot's one of those guys. He's in my little black. I'm joking about that, people. But, when you think of hypotheticals, what would have been? If Lot had not been, things would be different, right? And that's really what I want us to dwell on here. I'm sorry for the content of this. The Bible calls it what it is. It's really wicked. It's shocking. I'll just read it as it is. And verse 30, Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him. They had son-in-laws. Remember, he had son-in-laws. Remember what happened to his son-in-laws? They wouldn't leave Sodom. The firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old. There's not a man on the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine. We'll lie with him, that we may preserve the seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in, lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, when she arose. It came to pass on the morrow, the firstborn said to the younger, Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also. Go thou in, lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with them. And he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. The firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab. The same as the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and called his name Ben-Ammi. The same is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. You know, in Hebrew, Ben means son of. So Ben-Ammi, Ben-Ammon, so son of Ammon. So Lot and his daughters, really Lot is the father of the Moabites and the father of the Ammonites. So let's go to Matthew chapter 1. You know this too. I'm not probably sharing anything new with you, but Matthew chapter 1. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat Judas and his brethren. And Judas begat Phares and Zerah of Thamar, and Phares begat Ezram, and Ezram begat Aram. And Aram begat Amminadab, and Amminadab begat Naasson, and Naasson begat Salmon. And Salmon begat Boaz of Rachab. And Boaz begat Obed of Ruth. And Obed begat Jesse. Jesse begat David the king. David the king begat Solomon of her that had been the wife of Urias. And Solomon begat Rehoboam. Rehoboam begat Abiah. Abiah begat Asa. Asa begat Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat begat Joram. And if you go down to verse 15, Eliad begat Eleazar, and Eleazar begat Mathan, and Mathan begat Jacob. Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, who was born Jesus, who is called